Good afternoon and welcome to the Edinburgh International Book Festival for this poetry reading by Kate Clanchy and Roddy Lumsden. My name is Robyn Marsack and I'm the director of the Scottish Poetry Library. I'm allowed a very brief plug for the library, which, if you don't know it, is at the foot of the Cannon Gate near the new Parliament. It's a cheap jibe to say that we were built on time and on budget, but nevertheless I can't resist it. It's a very beautiful building, a calm, contemplative space out of the hurly-burly of the festival, and if you haven't been there, I highly recommend it. I think it's particularly appropriate that these two poets should be paired this afternoon, both because they are both Scottish-born and because they have the same fierce and seductive intelligence in writing, both about all sorts of subjects, but perhaps about love in particular. Kate is going to read first. She was born in Glasgow and now lives in Oxford. She published her first collection, the provocatively titled Slattern, in 1996, when it won the Forward Prize for Best First Collection and a Saltire Prize. Her second book, Samarkand, published in 1999, was also shortlisted for a Forward Prize. She has a play coming out on Radio 4 on Friday at 9 o'clock called The Birds of the Air. So if you're not at the festival, perhaps you're at home with your radios and you can tune into that. And she has a new collection coming out next year called Newborn. Kate Clanchy.
I want to read new poems from my new collection this afternoon. My new collection is a sequence. It's not really a story, but it starts from conception of my son and moves forward until when he's about 2.5. So I shouldn't have to do, well, it's my fault if I have to do quite a lot of explaining in between the poems. And I want to start at the beginning and just read a selection of the poems as we go through. When I say the book starts at conception, it's all very clean and tidy, don't worry. This is one of those photos. When you think of how a baby is conceived, I think we've all got biology textbook pictures in our minds, and it's strange to elide those pictures with some real images of yourself and realise what must have been going on. This poem's called 1, 2. The camera has caught me in the church doorway, stooping to fasten what must be my old cork-soled sandals, their thick suede straps, that dry, worn grip at the heel and instep. I'm smiling downwards, pinkly self-conscious, and above me the arch is an extraordinary blue. New. The whole place was just lime-washed, azure and sapphire rough-brushed over moss. It stood in the moist heat at a confluence of rivers. I've even noted their names, and the date, which says you, love, are perhaps 10 cells old. In the humid space beneath my dress, my body is bent in the small effort of buckling, the sag of my stomach briefly leant on my thigh, and at the crux, in the press of my nerveless places, you are putting me on easily, the way a foot puts on a shoe. Writing about any kind of love is sometimes easier when the love is lost, and I think many poets have difficulty in writing celebratory poems. Being pregnant is a very special kind of blessing when you actually get what you ask for, and then you're scared by the consequences of having asked for that. And this is a poem about being 2 months gone pregnant and wondering what the end of the whole story will be. And I was thinking about all those folk tales when people make wishes and make a mess of it. So the man who gets 3 wishes and accidentally wishes for a sausage, and then his wife wishes the sausage was on his nose, and then they have to use the last wish to get the sausage back off. 2 months gone. It makes us want to shut all doors, turn off the news, the phone, light after light, pull the stairs like a ladder up behind us, until, beneath the covers, the darkness pressing in upon us, We are the pair in the heart of the tale, the woodsman who spared the unicorn, the kitchen maid who hooked a witch from the well and held her toe through 14 frightful incarnations, and one walked home from the woods with a wish like a brimming glass of water, and when the goblin with the question came, sang out to his single rhymed conundrum the answer, all we ever wanted. In the black, after the thunderclap, we wait for the crooked town to wake, find gilded roofs, loaves on each table, for the crowds to come, half-dressed, incredulous, for our fortune, squalling in its cradle. There's an alternate spelling of underway, which is underway, W-E-I-G-H, as in weight. Because apparently when you send a boat out to sea, if it's under a heavy weight, it'll move out smoothly and heavily. And this poem is called Underway, and it's about the last weeks of pregnancy. Underway. In the last month, I would cycle each dusk round the meadow, watching the rabbits hop briskly away from the wheel. This was May, and the hay grew knee-high, thigh-high, and I sighed through it, past whippets and walkers, slender, meandering lovers, thinking of the physics of ships, how a keel cuts best through deep waters under a certain pressure of freight. This is about driving to the hospital. Driving to the hospital. We were low on petrol, so I said, let's freewheel when we get to the hill. It was dawn, and the city was nursing its quiet, and I liked the idea of arriving with barely a crunch on the gravel. You smiled kindly and eased the clutch gently and backed us out of the driveway and patted my knee with exactly the gesture you used when we were courting, remember, on the way to your brother's. I like driving with my baby. That's what you said. And at the time I wondered why my heart leapt and leapt. And this is a paired poem called Driving Home. You know, when people with new babies drive home so slowly, they quite often get stopped by the police when they're drunk. And it's noticeable the you in this poem isn't the father now, it's the child. Driving home. I want you to know it was your father picked you up when you were crumpled and warm as a handkerchief drawn from his pocket. And your father who walked you out of the maze of the hospital while I flapped largely behind. And your father who tucked you into the car and chose the exit unerringly and drove us home evenly, slowly, as though we were nosing through floral, curious crowds, as if the car were an ambassador and we were rich suddenly, tremulous, old. One of the difficult things with a small baby is the idea that you're going to bond with it immediately and love it immediately, and that happens at once. I didn't really feel that. I think it was something I had to kind of make an effort to do. Because, like many women of my generation, I quite honestly had more experience handling cats than I did small babies. This poem's just called Love. Let this person sit down. A lot of babies look like small cartoons of their fathers. Mine did, like a little misericord, a little carving. Seems quite a common thing. Love. I hadn't met his kind before. His misericord face, really, like a joke on his father, blurred as if from years of polish. His hands, like curled, dry leaves. The profligate heat he gave out, his shallow, careful breaths. I thought his filaments would blow. I thought he was an emperor dying on silk cushions. I didn't know how to keep him wrapped. I didn't know how to give him suck. I had no idea about him. At night, I tried to remember the feel of his head on my neck, the skull small as a cat's, the soft spot hot as a smelted coin, and the hair, the down, fine as the innermost vellum layer of some rare snow creature's aureole of fur. If you could meet such a beast, if you could get so near. I started there. Michael spent his first few weeks in little white nighties, lying in a basket and making all those amazing little gestures that tiny babies do. This poem's called Infant, and it's I was thinking of those early Celtic saints that sailed themselves across the sea in little coracles, and those Anglo-Saxon poems that I was made to translate at university, the Wanderer and the Seafarer. Infant. In your frowning, fugitive days, small love, your coracled, ecstatic nights, possessed or at peace, hands clenched on an unseen rope or raised in blessing, like the Pope, as your white etched feet tread sooty roofs of canal tunnels or lie released, stretched north in sleep. You seem to me an early saint, a Celt, eyes fixed on a celestial light, patiently setting the sextant straight to follow your God-sent map, now braced against a baffling gale, now becalmed, fingers barely sculling through warm, muddy tides. Soon you will make your way out of this estuary country, leave the low farms and fog banks, tack through the brackish channels and long, reed-clogged rivulets, reach the last turn, the salt air and river mouth, the wide grey sea of your life. One of the things that should be better known about babies is what incredibly hard work it is. And also, I'm not the kind of work that I was used to or very good at. You know, there's just a huge amount of scraping small blobs of Weetabix off the floor with chisels. I don't know about the adhesive powers of Weetabix, but I think personally you could build a house with them quite easily. And after a while, I found that the easiest thing to do was to just sit with another woman and a baby and let the time pass. This poem's called Plain Work, and it's about some of those kind of women's works that we've forgotten how to do that I have, in particular, I can't darn socks and that kind of thing. Can't even knit. Plain work. We should knit, Joanna, or tat, however that is done, these winter afternoons. We should drop wood eggs down socks or hold long netted wefts between us. We should have stuff to show for this, for the days we've sat together, waiting for our babies to get over a tooth, a want, a croupy fever, to get an hour older. Yards of it by now. Enough to fill this room, surround us. Great rolls of random rainbow cloth, twisted, lumpen, fine, the bright wool stitched in, line by line. First winter of Michael's life was the winter of floods in England, and great waves of insane damp emotion in me as well. This is a poem about my house did not flood this badly, but it's about floods of emotion. It's called Ararat, which presumably is where you get at the other end. Ararat. Winter of floods. Winter of broken banks and radio warnings and me running down the road with a pushchair screaming and a cloud helicoptering low behind me. Remember even the genteel charwell bursting, the Isis brimming, swelling under its muddy meniscus like a body rolling in sleep in a blanket. The times you came home to find the armchairs floating, the carpet a quicksand, the tables at unprecedented levels, the baby awash in his Moses basket, and me bailing madly as he rose to the ceiling. Yet here we all are, no worse than muddy. And look, the hills emerging, exactly the same, casual as knees. I'm going to move. It's about learning to walk, which, when that stage when they insist on letting go on the sofas and plunge themselves to certain death on the floor, and realising that I was always going to be worried that he was going to fall over. Learning to walk. He's on the brink, all day hanging on a table's edge, nosing his feet, his fists, his grand, round Sèvres head, slowly into nothing. All my life, I've smashed cups and wept. And this is forever too, I guess. This liquid heart, this sense that he's the water, I'm the glass. There aren't many poems about motherhood in general, and as far as I know, there are no other poems about having an absolute all-out row with your 1.5-year-old, so I'm quite proud of this one. And it's one of those occasions when both of us had descended to utter irrationality on the question of wearing trousers. It's a stormy day outside. Storm. So, here at the height of this summer of wrong, in this most wrong hour of this most wrong day, in the heart of the week which went awry, now while the rain washes the window free of every roof we know, of every tree, you and I, small one, have come to an impasse. You're red, half-dressed, pushing your car up the hill of the chair. I'm white, flat out in a field of trousers, listening to the wind, which is your own twin, darling, howl for its place, for its proper season, and bash our doors and walls with its enormous kitchen roll tube trumpet. You do a great deal of walking around with small children, trying to persuade them to go places, round a gate or into a shop or out of a shop or into the bath and out of the bath. And very often it feels as if your view has been restricted to about 3 feet. And this is a short poem just called The View, it's about walking down our lane. And it's both a completely closed space and an infinite space. Cowpoke, the job of a cowpoke is to poke a cow through the gate. The View. So much of this is cowpoke work. So much of this is gates and getting through them. There could be a mountain rearing above us. There could be a city hung above the cloud line, and still I'd be keeping my eyes on your footprints. Still I'd be steering this flock home. Do you think there's a mountain, my darling, my poppet, stooped there on your stick, like the village elder? Is it upside down in the depths of that puddle? I shall flop down beside you, straight-legged and muddy, stir up a sunset in the altering oil. Another thing that happens to mothers is that you find yourself in the common places, on the commons, in the parks, feeding the ducks. And this poem is called Commonplace, and it's trying to answer the question, what's it like and where are we? I think you're both in nobody's space and everybody's space, the space that nobody talks about and the place that everyone remembers. Commonplace. What can I tell you about all this? After all, we are ordinary. And surely you've seen us in the park, by the lake. Daily we watch the swans, yearlings, come in their dozens, pale-beaked, identical, throw them our bread again and again. What need I say, when of course you remember these long days going forward, these gold days sliced lengthways, In the distance, the sound of a train retreating, the soundless swans turning on the dark, glossy water, the low steps home. I have nothing to say, and will say anyway. We are commonplace, he and I. We are borderless, glorious. We are mother and child coming home together, and we walk on fields as green as any field, babbling like Falstaff when he died. One of the things I like best about motherhood is reading children's books. And this is, actually I might like to advertise my next title, in fact, is not Newborn, it's Our Cat Henry Comes to the Swings, which is about my cat going to the swings, which will be out next year as well. But this is about Beatrix Potter and all those stories about coziness. And Michael very interested in those stories. And I think, we think it's cuddly and lovely, but I think it's also because toddlers think that the world is very, very big. And in this trip, we're coming back from a little trip in the car. It's called The Dream of Warm Things. All the way back, he talks about the calf we saw in the field, a Jersey calf with a thick cream coat, which he was scared of, in fact, when it stumped over the hummocked grass to greet us, knots in its furry, fly-bone ears. We watched it take its milk, and now he wants to make sure of its mother and father, wants to call them down from the rapidly distancing hills, wants to wrap the calf in a blanket, press it safely under cover, the way Peter and Mopsy are pressed in their book, neat in their linen, rush-lit bed, the way his whole world lately is honeycombed with dreams of warm things, mice about their tiny, humid lives, spiders snug in spouts. I stroke the soft, hot dome of his forehead, the furrow where the line will come, and say yes to the calf in his unlikely blankets, the private, familial life of the flea. I say, all of them are warm enough. All of them are tucked up now, listening to their mother's stories as the globe turns to the enfolding darkness, as we draw up and stop the car in the dark. So the book is all about gains and losses, and it's just the last two poems in the book. This one's called The Other Woman, which is about every so often I go back to London and meet up with my Bridget Jones friends, and they find that I hit the floor after about one glass of wine and fall asleep. And there is a loss. There's a loss to the self that lived alone in a flat. I think it's good. Actually, it's quite a nice shape. You see, it's all in steps because it's about reflections and doublings. I think it's quite easy to understand, though. The Other Woman. I am running to meet her now, the girl who lives on her own, who has in her hand the key to her own hallway, her own bare polished stair, who is clacking down it now in kitten heels, swearing, who is marching over envelopes marked with a single name, who is late, can be late, sleep late, forget things, who tonight has forgotten hat, gloves and umbrella and is running not caring through the luminous rain. What shall we say? Shall I slip off my coat and order cold wine and watch myself sip it through the long row of optics arching my back on the velvet banquette, and pick up the wit, the moo of the mouth as we pass jokes like olives, and say the right thing, and stand up for my round, tapping the bar with a rolled-up 20, tipsy, self-conscious, a girl, a vessel of secrets so carefully held in? Or down just one glass and see stars, and the whole room goes smeary, have nothing to say, and say all the same, apropos of nothing, in the middle of everything, you don't understand. What happens in birth is someone slips from your side, someone full-sized. Will she yawn, get her bag, start tucking her fags in, when I get out his photo, say, look how he's grown. All by himself. He has grown to the size of my life. I wanted to call the book Stance because I think motherhood changes the way you stand physically. Does your back in, actually. But also in the eyes of the world. But they wouldn't let me. They said it was too arty. So the book will be called Newborn. But this is the poem called Stance. It's about standing in that mother way with a child on your hip. Stance. Now I sit, my child, on the jut of my hip, and take his weight with the curve of my waist, like a tree split at the fork, like lovers leaning out of a waltz. Nothing is lost. I was never one of those girls, stood slim as a sapling. I was often alone at the dance. Thank you.
There'll be time for a few questions at the end, but we're going on now to hear Roddy Lumsden read. Roddy was born in Fife, to which he recently returned as poet in residence at St Andrews Bay Hotel, an appointment that involved a whole range of hotel activities, from making a salad to taking a spa bath. A poetry pamphlet resulted, The Bubble Bride, to add to his collections Yeah, Yeah, Yeah from 1997, which was shortlisted for Forward and Saltire Prizes, and The Book of Love, which was published in 2000 and was a Poetry Book Society choice. Roddy's new and selected poems are due out from Blood Axe next autumn. Roddy Lumsden.
Hi there. I'm going to read a selection of work from various books and various times. Starting with 3 poems from this book, which is called Roddy Lumsden is Dead, which was my third collection. And I'm going to read 3 poems from the sequence, which is called Roddy Lumsden is Dead. I was reading in Cheltenham a few years ago, and I'm very wary of this thing where they say, will you stay with one of the organisers? Because it can turn out to be, a sort of camp bed in someone's attic. But I went back to this woman's abode, and she said, this is your wing. Which is very nice, because it was a huge 15th century monastery she lived in. And she also told me a story which I knew as soon as she started telling me I was going to steal for a poem. And this poem's called My True Love. Here's a tale as it was told to me. When the old cart horse was retired, the farmer's daughters rode him on weekends. Yet still while plodding down the brae, they'd feel him lean his great bulk back to compensate the load no longer there, a phantom cart which he was doomed to tow all of his days, as if a current buzzed uphill from foot to brow, and hot sparks dandered in his weary heart. I want you then, I do not want you now. This is a little poem from near the back of the book, but it kind of introduces, in a way, a longer poem I'm going to read. It's a little poem called Simpatica. I had a trip to the Philippines a couple of years ago and wrote. I don't often write when I go on trips, but I wrote a lot about my experiences in the Philippines. And this is reading in a university library, and the students took turns to run the lift. Simpatica. No one speaks more quietly than the lift girl, rising and descending in the library at the University of Santo Tomas, whose whisper exists at one scintilla, no more, above the effort of my silence, whose words sound like tiny bubbles bursting. Listen now, a stopped clock has more music. A tray of water roars and rises higher. And yet when I lean in to choose a number, I'm certain it is your name she is saying. And this is another poem that's based sort of on a trip. And I'm very interested in that the Filipinos still believe in folk religion, something that was eradicated here by sort of monotheistic dogma. And they really do believe in all these minor gods and goddesses which populate certain trees and certain countrysides, certain parts of the countryside in certain areas. And a novelist called Jing Hidalgo told us this wonderful story about an English professor who had found a minor goddess attaching herself to him in a sort of poltergeist way. And it was wonderful, the sort of commonplace nature of the story, how the goddess had appeared in when he was shopping for socks, which is where this poem starts. And when I came back, I was going through a strange time of my life 2.5 years ago, and I kind of half entertained the idea that I had brought a minor goddess back with me from, I'm blushing now, from the Philippines, but it was it kind of means everything will be okay. And there are two very long German nouns in this, which I don't need to explain. They're contextually explained. My meeting with the goddess. This is Cromarty. You remember how in the story the academic is shopping for socks in a mall in Manila, when the goddess appears in the form of a shop assistant who touches his beloved face and disappears. My goddess decides to show herself at a workshop in a sleepy Highland town. She has chosen a champion disguise, a restless German redhead, at least my age, in a cardigan sewn with beads of rain, which shine there all weekend and never dry. There's a new identity she's been devising ever since she followed me back here from the dark sugar streets of Bacolod. She's sweet but complicated, divorced, a lapsed romantic wearing a cynic's hat, with a wheat-free diet and 6 years in the Findhorn Foundation behind her. A nice crypto-theological touch, that. And a bachelorette pad over in Och, where she secretly whips up pans of adobo. We escape to the Firth front to wolf great platters of breaded seafood and salad, to wrestle with tartar sauce sachets. Our pasts are shadowy because she's a goddess and because ECT wiped half of mine. I recall something about a putting green. She talks of a brief marriage in Switzerland. I try her with Unterhaltungs Möglichkeiten and Selbstbedienungs Lebensmittelgeschäft, and she laughs politely, Bahalana, batting them back with a Graf forehand. Highland dogs cruise the streets. For once I do not take the chance they afford to move in close. I should have embraced my goddess, should have held her hand, if only to feel it disappear in mine, to see her shrink away, casting me adrift in the back streets of a Black Isle town. And weeks later, flying down to Galway, there she'll be again beside me, her thighs broader and longer, the cute tippy-toe walk that screamed not German, gone, her nose in a trashy Scottish novel, another nice touch. But it will be her, biddable and tolerant her, willing to deliver my baby face, girl to girl and town to town, in my time of sluttery. For now I leave her dram in hand at the bar, talking to some local worthy, her accent shifting from Negros to Bayern to Easter Ross. And tomorrow I will wake in the Japanese annex, my pomegranate mouth, my yak flank hair, the skin of my back busy with mill sweat, feet beeling and dinging like buck rabbits, and a dispirited girl will play a Chopin nocturne over and over through in the sunlit lounge, as if someone had written a script. Sorry, as if someone hadn't written a script. Here's a couple of poems from the Book of Love, my hit record. This is the last poem in the Book of Love. It's called Lullaby. Between the rusted anchor and the resting place, between the rattler's rattle and its fangs, between the looming steeple and the steeplechase, between the skyscape and the boomerang, between the drowsy lovers and the living dead, A to L, my love, and M to Z, between the tomboy's cartwheel and the carousel, between the crow's nest and the sinking sun, between amanuensis and Emmanuel, between the cherry popper and the one, between Rivali bugle and the watershed, A to L, my love, and M to Z, between the night path clearer and the highwayman, between audition piece and curtain call, between the spring's first orphan and the searing pan, between ignition spark and wrecking ball, between the sleeping beauty and the slug abed, A to L, my love, and M to Z. This a poem about leaving Edinburgh for London, which I did a few years back, although I now live in Bristol. Acid. My mother told it straight, London will finish you off. And I'd heard what Dr. Johnson said, when a man is tired of London, he is tired of life. But I'd been tired of life for 14 years. Scotland, never thoroughly enlightened, was gathering back its clutch of medieval wants. And lately there had been what my doctors call a pica, like a pregnant woman's craving to eat Twix with piccalilli, or chunks of crunchy sea coal. I'd been guzzling vinegar, tipping it on everything, falling for women who were beautifully unsuitable and hiding up wines off the cowgate with a pokeful of hot chips, drenched in the sacred stuff, and wrapped in the latest, but not last, edition of the Sunday Post, where I read that in London they had found a Chardonnay with a bouquet of vine leaves and bloomed skins, a taste of grapes, and no finish whatsoever, which clinched the deal. One poem from my first book, Yeah, 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 which I think is my favourite poem in this book. The World's End. Supposing you were wrong, and I was right. I was lying through there thinking of a place where we and the land must part, of where a child swings on a wire fence, watching, and where might be found a paperback whodunit, blown brown, where a river stalls and seeps into the grass, where all the footprints lead one way and no one, on a late shift, stamps your pass, where a clisp of light in the willow herb is what was dropped from the swag in the chase, or a shred of a 60s hothouse, a place some call a border, some an edge, as if the many missing, or a saviour, will rise in welcome when we step over. I'm going to read a poem in Scots now, with apologies to those of you who don't have perfect elastic Scots. It's quite dense, but I hope you enjoy the sense of it. It's from this little pamphlet, which is poems I wrote during my hotel residency. And I hadn't written much in Scots before, but there's a few Scots pieces in this. And there's an area near the hotel called Kittick's Den, which is an SSSI. It's a beautiful wooded grotto, basically, about 300 or 400 yards long. And Kittick in Old Scots means basically hussy. And it's said that it's where the local farm teenagers used to go to do their trysting. Shall we leave it at that? And this is sang at the Kittick's Loddy. So it's in the voice of the man who's looking forward to one more night with the Kittick, but it's really about the animals as well. Gin a nicht like this for ein smear fin me, when horrit skilly pusset burks, gloamin' and ruskin in the murk and sudden doose, and a warm sot wind quid swells, was sound like a kirk for clareshaws, the such daffs the buchs, whor lang lugget hullets duke on their spakes, teetin gin a sheermoose, with chance through the windle stray. Gin a by spale nicht like Donwood fin me, when the brocky snavels and creakles on his clump, and shush, yon's the yop a bizzard wi' wan ee steek to the bizen world, the tither na dwarm a thousand skeltrin rattans. Genty does, tipper through the flush, botties, curry and clappards, the lin skills into the civer, and sign the blackfoot's sleek at work is done. Gnamich teal yon tiger to me, ma teeny bash, and flisk mahoy, ma rump, slinking doon the brain till the den it tries to do her. The twice food to the thrapples, no wi whiff or swat, but in a swander, hertz, trunsen, temeraire, and by, fidder and het, aneath me, the Kittick, cheatin' henny lees, and the hail rearin' nicht yet to come. The translation of that is in here if you really want to know what it means. This is the title poem of this little pamphlet. It's called The Bubble Bride. I did have a hydrotherapy bath, and it was absolutely wonderful. They basically put you in this huge thing, and there's this bar to keep you down so you don't float up to the roof. And it's just, the machine does things to you. It's like a kind of medical jacuzzi. And I had this idea that it was like a bride. It's a bit of a dodgy analogy, but I stuck with it. The Bubble Bride. As I sink in, she taunts me, and I purl and rollick, my knuckles splaying, my legs are pilloried to keep me in my place. Her ways are wilds, so much going on beneath her surface. And when she lets off steam, her scents are citrus, carrots, coconut, and pine. My blood chicanes, raises its gem, and says, okay. She bids me sweat and grabs me by the shoulders, burling me. Lambada, tango, waltz, and triple time. A Bach cantata capers up and someone chants in Basque. My spine's a glockenspiel. She pushes me into a crowd with a place to be and fast, foaming, swirling me now while squibs leap up and puddles puff and pop guns volley off. Her fingers tingle soles and calves. My sides are split with tickles, swollen muscles soothed and scapulae placated. My bride-to-be makes me a fizz-cake fusing in the water, her ration, her ruddy Romeo, her helping, a suddy and sizzling Sichuan platter, full, willing, and fueling the bath sides with my breath, my heart thudding and scudding in the surge, her spray plate at my nape. I call, I will, and from the spa, the bridesmaid in her white uniform slips in to check the job is done. And in the gloam of vapor trousseau, a cumulus of sultry weather, royals wet and warm around the treatment room. I lie here, the muttering groom, a lulling tide of semi-sleep, shifting in me, and the bubble bride parading up and down my back forever. Lastly from this pamphlet, back to Kittick's Den, poem about owls. They're very elusive creatures, and I actually saw one after I wrote this poem, which kind of disappointed me. Evidence of owls. Unthinkable spurs, bad jewels laced with a trincum of mouse spines, and the black geel eyes of creeping things. One wing feather, a blade of cream, tan, honey, amber, ochre, flutters on the turf wall of a bunker. The starter's car arrives, its headlights flooding two infernal eyes, wheedling the clubhouse and the whins. Conclusive evidence, a crescent of static which quick wings have left behind, still seethes and cozens, a gap in the dawn air over Kittick's Den. I've got time, I think, just for 2 or 3 new poems. I'm rather loath to read a poem about dead babies after Kate has read all those poems about babies, but that's what this poem is. The Tremendous Few. So many songs for the suicides, for lives drawn short in middle age, those taken in the evening's hiss, or who buckled in the draught halfway across the ford. When the day tarries, I wonder if only you and I whisper of scattered ashes, shoebox coffins, the gemstone hearts of the stillborn and miscarried who failed to reach the shore, whose fading voices failed to break the hanging dark, when children roam the streets in gangs on mischief night. Mischief Night being the title of the collection these are from. My mum just told me at lunchtime she doesn't like my darker poems, so I'm just choosing some less dark ones to finish off with. Yeah, two more. Charcoal Sketch. It's a kind of cold comfort farm little poems, but absence of air and a sinister farmyard. Fire on the fields, the stubble sputters and the lark song stops mid-note. The chapel bell creaks on in the evening haze. Turmoil in the hen house, while in the Barton, lentils spilled from a toppled, airtight flagon and tick onto the table. A cigar snivels in a jam jar. Crane flies jig on the sap. A rusting bone shaker merges with the coal shed's copper roof. The charcoal burner prods his pile to make amends. His compass spins in mayhem as he sucks a sweet root. Down in the hideout, two curly-headed tykes practice hand jive, or else the sinister language which the hand jive has become. I'm finished with a poem that I wrote about coming home from the pub one night in Canada. I was in the Rockies for 10 weeks, and it was a strange place and a strange time. And I wrote a whole set of notes, which I later discovered and didn't understand, but wrote a poem using them anyway. It's called Turning into Grizzly Street. All the streets in Banff in Alberta are named after local animals, so you get sort of Elk Avenue and Sparrowhawk Drive and so on. That's what I'm like someone whistling Yellowbird or Yankee Doodle, stomping home beneath the northern lights shining. Here's Roddy, 15 below and no hat with me, bald as gull's eggs, Yule and telly, my tummy full and all the trimmings, Reese's cups and crab meat chowder, Arctic red like someone crooning a case of you, or Chelsea Morning by Joni, who was born Roberta. O Canada, how cold, how dry you make of me, Orion sculled, the guest star in a winter drama, the brown king on the second camel, and never a word is dull or dithered. What am I like? Unhinged, unsteady up Caribou Street, onto Grizzly, my big feet sinking down through powder, the gardens jaunting below their blankets, all white and crispy. I've gone troppo, let's make that frosto. Cabin fever, Tunnel Mountain hovers neatly, the air runs so thin I get jealous, as scabby cougars, scrawny coyotes circle the township. Hot springs bubble in electric shock and nosebleed city. If it ain't beef, it ain't Alberta. Are those the songs of Cassin's Auklet, Tundra Swan and Purple Martin? That's what I'm like a lone elk, nosing the fir fronds in the top freeze, a nutcracker squat on a creaking lodgepole. Stars fizz for me. The man in the moon hawks out a comet. Night gets giggles. The world tastes funny. Thank you.
We do have a few minutes for questions if you feel so minded. Are there any?
Why did they write the poem?
Yes. The question was, why did Roddy write a section of poems called Roddy Lumsden is Dead?
It's the name of the book, it's also the name of a long sequence of poems which we're going to look for. You mean in terms of the kind of...
Can you wait for one second?
Title.
Can you wait for 1 second? So that you might. So we have to do a little bit of technical adjusting here. It was suggested that I recited a poem of my own to fill in the time, but I don't write them.
No, it's really about a loss of selfhood. There's a long note within the back of the book explaining, and it's really difficult to sum it up in a quick answer. But it's about a loss of selfhood, alter ego. I also just like it as a title. It's kind of brave and a bit self-indulgent. I'm all for self-indulgence in poetry.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes. One moment.
Would you say that your choice of work to read today was typical of your output?
Maybe not. I mean, my work's really changing. Do you think it wasn't typical?
I would say no.
Possibly. Inevitably, it's now 7 years since I wrote the first book, and I think all poets look back on their own work rather dismally because you're really pushing ahead and trying to write differently, trying to write better. And I've very much moved away from, well, not very much, but to an extent moved away from what I was doing in the mid-90s, which was writing a lot of formal poems, mainly about men and women. But basically you move on, and also you even though you shouldn't, you listen to the critics, and critics say, oh no, here's Roddy Lumsden doing the same old poems about men and women and sonnets and so on, and it gets under your skin, and you find yourself writing, pantoums about chaffinches instead.
Yeah, I found the last one you did, they're much more typical of what I expected, sort of rolling out of the pub sort of thing.
Yeah, I suppose it's getting tired of my own image as a poet, this kind of bacchanalian, womanizing, which I've never really been that. Which I'm not anymore. I've got slip-on shoes and things these days. I've got slight interest in gardening as well.
It's Kate. I would like to ask about the themes of your poems really took me back. I mean, my sons are 53 and 51 now, so I think you'll appreciate that. But I wonder why you put it into poetry form. To some extent, I think I get lost sometimes in the actual poem. You start off, and I get what you're getting at, and then I find that I think I would prefer to read it in essay type or shorter.
Well, that's quite a fundamental criticism.
I mean, it's just, I find that difficult.
I write poems because I'm a poet, and poems are. A little girl in a primary school asked me why I write poems. I think my real answer is I like reading poems best. That's my favourite literary form, and that's how I write. I hope that the poems would be clearer, perhaps if you had them on the page.
Oh yes.
I think there is a difference in when you, yeah.
But I do find I have to read them again.
Yeah, and I think there is a difficulty when you read poems aloud, especially for the first time. People haven't read them. That you can't. I think all poems you read them and then you read them back and then you read them, and we can't. I can't do that in this arena.
Yes, true. Yeah.
I hope they're poems because they're lyric thoughts and because they found their proper form. But if they haven't, then they failed.
Yeah, thank you.
Gentleman over here.
Coming fresh to Kate Clanchy and fresh to the question, I suppose. I think the exercise that the last questioner would have liked to have attempted was actually attempted by Dr. Spock a couple of generations ago. And the limitations of that have been demonstrated by subsequent social experience. I think I can respond more readily to the fresh vision and the lucidity of the insight.
Thank you. Thanks.
There's a lady at the back here, please. At the back.
Kate, when you were having the experiences, particularly with the baby, where you are for a long time doing very little except the playing, the walking, the experiencing, and you knew you were a poet, you were accustomed to putting your experiences, your dreams into poetical words. Did you find yourself finding phrases you wanted to use as you were actually experiencing something like the walking? Were you thinking of words for this now that you later shaped into being a poem?
Well, the poems are written at different times, and they're put together as a sequence, and it appears as if they move through time fairly smoothly. In fact, that they're written from all different points of view, and some of them were written very close to the experience, and some of them were written, I mean, all the ones about the birth and things were actually written a good time afterwards, because it left me so speechless. I had nothing to say for quite a long time, and then I did, and then I wrote it down, and then some of them are written, they're written at different times. I find, I mean, I know that many poets, shall we call them men, like to be in libraries and need a lot of silence and space and a reading space. I found myself quite nourished by boredom, or the mild boredom of being. I think my first poems were written out of the mild boredom of school teaching. After I kind of got over the total terror of the first couple of years, the mild boredom of invigilating an exam, I found quite a creative environment. In the same way that the sort of, I was tremendously in life, and at the same time there were a lot of times when you just think, unless I think about something else now, I'm going to go mad. And I found that was quite a good imaginative environment for me. I was pushed and pulled in a creative way. So some of them were instant and some of them were later. But I mean, when I was afraid, when I decided to have a child, that having a child, and I think it's a male idea, isn't it? If you have so Cyril Connolly, if you have a pram in the hall, you won't write a book. I find walking a pram very creative and a good environment. But it's so involving sometimes, of course, you don't have any words at all. But then also it makes you think of words.
Thank you.
Makes me think of words anyway.
We've got time for a very brief question, or a very brief answer.
I'll make it as brief as possible. Kate, I'd like to ask you, how do you feel about becoming a classic of the Scottish exam board? Your poems are taught in the Scottish classrooms.
What I would like to say is that I was set for the higher syllabus, and I was on the exam, which I was very happy about because I was a teacher, and I think most people's best encounters with poetry come through the classroom, and I'm sure many able teachers taught that poem very well. They paid me £17.50. And I don't think that's enough, do you? I think that's really rotten, because there's thousands and thousands of those they printed. And it doesn't even reflect a percentage of a penny per copy. But apart from that, I'm very happy about it. Now, I was a teacher, I like teachers teaching, I like students. I don't have any of those hang-ups about it.
But don't you worry, people will say, oh no, Kate Clanchy, I had her at school.
Oh, well, I mean, at least they'll know who I am.
Yeah.
They're all readers.
Thank you very much. And on that note, we must conclude this session. You have the opportunity to hear Kate again this evening. She's in a session in association with the Poetry Library with Robert Allen Jimison, and they're talking about news that stays news. That is the idea of the public themes of poetry and how poets approach them. There's some leaflets down there if you want to take one. Thank you so much for being an attentive audience. I think Catherine promised us that the tent wouldn't blow away, though it's been straining and creaking at its moorings. But I think that really the poets have given us such wonderful readings that we were adrift on their words anyway and didn't pay any attention to the elements. Thank you so much, Kate and Roddy.